How should we check if those? Okay. Let's try attendance. I think honestly, I think right now I could name the front row, which is pretty good for me. And then try it out. Add yes. Okay, the Alex's I don't know yet. So where's the first Alex? Alex. And second Alex, okay, Alex here. Fifth, Alan. Who's Alan in the back. Well, I'm switching up your seating a little bit today, so I'm not looking in the right spot. Charlie's in the back, yes. Edwin is also in the back on this side, okay. Ethan in the back on that side. Jay here, yes. Harper in the front. Jake. Jake next, okay. Jeffrey in the back. Justin right here. Evan right here. Max there, yep. And Mitchell or Mitch? Mitch is fine. Molly not here again. Not in the Zoom, so don't know where Molly is. Omar. In the back now. Otto's still not here. Otto's not a person that's here. So okay, so the smallest one. Ramon, yes. Sam, yes. Spencer in the front, right? And Tiffany, Tiffany, and Victor, right? Victor's back there. Victor used to sit there. Now I'm confused. Is there anybody? Did I mark you off? Are you?
Indeed, I have first class.
Okay.
Just here, like.
Okay. And okay. Yeah, today for the slides, we're looking at the G3X PFAS intro, and then starting to look at piston engines and how those work. So,
Thank you.
okay. Has everyone now flown with their instructor? Did everyone have one flight in? Okay, good. So we're all a little bit at least introed into the G3X touchscreen in the plane. So you should have been your instructor kind of showing you some of how you use it. We'll just go over this briefly. If you have any questions that you weren't able to ask your instructor, feel free to now, and we'll just kind of go over all the different things that you can do with the G3X. So it's the Garmin G3X Touch. There we go. Okay, so down the parts that we're talking about, they like highlighted like with a red box. It might be hard to see because there's so much on the screen, but like down here, I'll try to use my mouse to show you down here. It's highlighting chapters and pages, and then I think it goes into each one. I think it goes in chapters and pages a little bit further, so we'll go back to this. But your comm 1 and then standby is up here. This is also going to be in your Garmin 650 that's in the middle of your screen. You probably switched frequencies using the knob in the middle to turn up there, but it's also on here on the G3X or comms. Transponder, it's a little blurry on this picture, but the way that you change it is by just touching up here on the top, and then you can, does it show it? No, and then you can just type in your squawk code. Does everyone know what a transponder is, or can someone tell me what a transponder is or what it does? Have we gotten there in Team School? Yeah.
I don't think it's for navigations and we are for.
Yeah, it's for it's radar based, so it transmits and receives radio signals to help ATC identify and track aircraft. So on your pre-flight, you can look under the fuselage of the plane. There's like a little like shark fin looking thing underneath there. You might have done on pre-flight, but they pointed out that's your transponder. When I say squawk code, you're like squawking these 4 numbers. This is a code that like lets ATC know what you're doing basically. Does anyone know if we're VFR flying? So we're all gonna be VFR flying during private. Do we know what code we're squawking to tell them we're VFR? Yeah, 1200, perfect. So when you're starting the plane, you're going through your checklist. Part of that is to check your transponder code. So sometimes if the plane isn't cleaned up after you get back, or after someone else gets back from their flight, it might still have a different squawk code that they use if they're instrument flying and they got a code from ATC. So it might have a different code. So that's part of the checklist, is to make sure that when you are flying VFR that you have 1200 squawked in there. So you're letting them know that you are flying VFR. There's also, this isn't really part of the slide, but since we're already talking about it, there's emergency squawk codes that you've probably reviewed in King School. Does anyone know? There's 3 of them. Does anyone know them? I love the front row is always ready. Anybody in the back? Yes, all in the back. Yeah, Alex, right? Yeah.
7500.
Yeah.
760.
Yeah.
770.
Perfect. Do we know what each one of them means?
So 5 is for fighting.
Yep.
76 is calm air.
Yeah, lost communications. Yeah, lost knots.
77 is just generally
Emergency.
emergency.
Emergency, yes. Some people think of like 77 gone to heaven, a little morbid, but yeah, a little morbid, but whatever you can to remember, because it's very important when you go through your emergency checklist. You're going to practice emergencies in the practice area with your instructor, and through that checklist, there's a part where you need to squawk the emergency code, so they know that you're having an emergency through ATC, and then you also change your frequency to the emergency radio frequency. Does anyone know the emergency radio frequency? No one? Okay, it's one, well, somebody, our instrument student? Anyone?
121.5.
Perfect. Yeah, so we're getting maybe a little bit ahead because we'll talk about actual like emergency procedures a little bit later, but since we're already talking about the squawk code, this is what we're using the squawk code for. So you're inputting that right here on the screen.
Does anybody know what button to hit to get that back to VFR of to 1200?
Oh yeah, yes. If it showed on here. Oh, actually, look right here on the side. It has it pulled up, so it's right here. So you can either type in the numbers, or there's a VFR button. Very helpful. So you can just click VFR, and then hit OK, and then it will show up here on top of your screen. Nice. Then GPS information. So this is our screen is used in conjunction with our GTN 650 in the middle. You'd probably see a bunch of buttons where you can like insert a flight plan on that menu. That's how you enter waypoints for GPS flying, things like that, and it's connected to this screen. So if you enter a flight plan on that screen and say your next waypoint, it will tell you the distance, your ETE, your ground speed, your track. It will give you all that information on this screen as well as on your actual screen that you've entered your flight plan on the 650. So that's helpful to have on top. So when we keep when we're looking inside, that we can have all of that on one screen. Then we're just generally going over the main PFD, that's our primary flight display, right here with all of our instruments. I'm sure your instructor went over this on where to look for all your instrument indications. So right here is going to be your airspeed. There's a couple different airspeeds on here. Does anyone know what TAS would mean on top of here with the top three? True airspeed, right? Does anyone have an idea of what true airspeed is yet? We're again getting a little bit ahead, but we can start talking about this stuff. Okay, it's your actual speed through the air corrected for altitude and temperature is how you can think about it. Then right here on this tape, right here is gonna be your indicated, your main speed that you're looking at. Most of the time when you're doing your scan, you're gonna be looking at your indicated airspeed here. And then at the bottom, it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but it says GS. Do you know what GS stands for? Ground speed, perfect. Anyone have an idea of what ground speed is? Yes. It can be your speed while you're taxiing, but we use it in the air as your actual track, your actual speed over the ground, how fast you're actually moving over the ground. So it takes your true airspeed and adds for wind correction. So if we've talked about headwinds and tailwinds, we'll get a little bit into that. But a headwind's the wind that's coming towards you. Tailwind would be pushing you from your tail of the airplane, right? So it can either slow you down if that air is moving towards you, or speed up if the air is moving behind you. So this can tell you your track or your speed going over the ground, and it also accounts for if you have a headwind or a tailwind. Like right here, I think we'll get into, there's a little wind box down here that tells you what direction. It might be the next one actually. No, it's not, but I think it will go. I saw another slide that shows it, but this is showing an estimate of what the wind is like. It's not always accurate in the plane, so don't rely completely on this indication, but it gives you an idea of where the wind is coming from and how fast and at what magnetic heading. So this is just an intro. Now that we're talking about it into the different types of airspeeds, we will have an actual lesson where we, dive deeper into specifically what everything is. But just so you know, when you're looking at your screen and you're flying, that's what those mean. Then in the middle here on this red box is your attitude indicator. So your attitude shows you your position relative to the horizon, right? So this is on a synthetic vision background. You see how you see like the grass and the river or whatever in the back, and then you have blue sky up here. I don't love synthetic vision, especially when we're trying to be VFR pilots. It's not really needed. Most of the time it's going to be set so it's just brown on the bottom, brown for the ground, blue for the sky. You won't really see this synthetic vision that's happening. It's like terrain. You see like a computerized generation of the terrain around. But it's normally going to be brown on the bottom, blue at the top, and then you have these kind of bars on the side and your arrow here that shows you your level with the horizon. Your attitude is level with the horizon. And then also on top, well, actually, to add to that, you're seeing your pitch indicated here. So degrees of pitch, 5, 10, up into. So if you did like a climb on one of your flights, they might have talked to you about what kind of pitch they want you to be at. And that's how you can indicate, or that's how you can know what pitch attitude you're at. And then up here, this little half circle is how you see your bank angle. So right here, straight and level, right? We're straight on. This little green, this has to do a little bit more with the instrument, but this right here is standard rate turn, this little green arrow. And then it's cut into, this is 30 degrees and 60 degrees is the bank, the most outside bank that you can do. So you kind of use this to gauge how much you're banking on each side, left to right. And then the tape on the right side is your altimeter. It shows our altitude, right? So we have on top, it shows this little blue, I'm sure your instructor went over this too, but I just want to make sure that we know all the buttons, but it has this little blue, we call it a bug on here. You also have a blue little, I don't know, rectangle, a bug for your heading. There's also a bug for your altitude. So it shows you what altitude you've bugged at. So you move the indicator to bug, if your instructor tells you to climb from 5,000 to 5,500, you can move that bug to 5,500 so you can anticipate when to level off at 5,500. You know where you're going and you're not just, if you get distracted, you can see, oh, I'm almost at the bugged altitude. Same with the heading, but up here is what altitude you bugged. And then obviously this is indicating what altitude you're currently at. And then down here is our altimeter setting. We'll talk about what It means by inches. This is right here, it has set at standard. But we'll get into that when we get into weather. I'm getting a little too far into all this. This is just a general intro into that, but that's gonna be when you get your ATIS and you get your weather information, they'll give you the altimeter or the correct time, and you turn that. I'm sure they showed you how to turn and set your altimeter, so that will show your current altimeter setting at the bottom here. And I think it goes on to, yeah, this tape on the side of our altimeter is our VSI, our vertical speed indicator. So this is going to show you your rate at which you're climbing or descending. It has a 5 and a 1 and a 2. That's going to be for 500, 1,000, and 2,000 feet per minute. So standard, good, constant climb or descent is at 500 feet per minute. So that's what we're looking for on our VSI. And then 1,000 is pretty fast. I don't think 2,000 is even accomplishable in the sling. So we're not even going to look at 2,000 feet per minute, but 500 is where you're looking at. Once you start a descent or you start a climb, you can watch your VSI will start to move, and we'll talk about how all these instruments actually get their information, because we're going to talk about how this has a little bit of a delay. So you want to take a look at what it's trending towards, but you don't want to follow it if you're trying to, I mean, VFR flying, we're looking outside anyway, you shouldn't be relying on your instruments, but there's a lot of time if you kind of follow this, you'll get off track because it's kind of trending either up or down because it has a lag on it. We'll talk about that later, but this shows you your rate at which you're climbing or descending. And it's also really helpful for when we're doing steep turns out in the practice area. And you can see when you look inside, you know, most of the steep turn you want to look outside, but when you take a glance inside and you see, you can look at your VSI and see where it's trending. If you start to see the needle or the little arrow start moving down before you've even lost altitude, you know that you're starting to descend even before you've hit, like you started to hit your altitude. So you can see the trend, okay, I'm starting to descend, and fix that before you actually get below your altitude. It's a little bit further than where you are, but a lot of you said that you had already tried steep turns, so it seems like you're pretty ahead in all this. So take a look inside. If you're looking at, you know, when you're looking outside, you kind of outside, glance inside to verify how your steep turn's going. So this is just a helpful tool to figure out, okay, am I trending down? Am I descending, starting to descend? And go ahead and add that correction before you actually get 500 feet below where you're supposed to be. Turn coordinator. We talked a little bit about this with aerodynamics, but this in the middle is our ball. This whole thing is our inclinometer, but the ball tells us that we're coordinated, right? So we talked about how it moves and slipping versus skidding turns, how to stay coordinated. We talked a little bit about how rudder pressure in the sling is a little bit lighter than other airplanes to keep it centered. It's a very stable training aircraft. So just keep an eye on, especially when you're turning and when you're in a takeoff configuration. We talked about left turning tendencies, or the video talked about left turning tendencies yesterday. So that's all those left turning tendencies are why you need a lot of right rudder on that takeoff roll and that takeoff climb, because you have full power in and all those tendencies are pushing the nose of the airplane to the left. So you'll see if you take off and you don't correct with any right rudder, that ball is going to be a little bit outside of the middle, and you'll just want to put on. Also, maybe they haven't gone over it yet, but they probably did. You step on the ball to center it. That's probably a big thing. If the ball's out here to the right, you would add some right rudder, step on the ball to bring it back to the middle. Does that make sense? Did you all go over this with your instructor? Is this familiar? Okay.
We did coordination exercises on their flights out to the practice area. Raise your hand if you did. Nobody?
Coordination, like being
Like-
coordinated during a turn.
Like rolling back and forth in and out of turns. So balls. Yeah.
Sometimes they can call it like Dutch rolls. I think
Yeah,
some,
yeah, they'll call
yeah.
Dutch rolls, if you like keep your nose focused at a
Mhm.
point and just roll back and forth like that. Sometimes you do like turn and turn back and forth. You guys, so 3 of you did it, 5 of you did it, raise your hand if you did. Okay. Yeah, that should really get you feeling the coordination. I think it's
Yeah.
a really important thing. The other instrument that you have that tells you if you're coordinated, you've got 2 cheeks on your butt. And like you'll feel it if it feels like you're getting pushed this way a little bit more on the same thing as the ball. So, I can do it with my eyes closed, and like I had an instructor take me around and tell me to use my rudder when I feel it like that way with my eyes closed, and he just put me in a bank and I step on the yeah. But it's really I don't know, it's an important thing.
It's kind of like what we talked about when I did that huge spiel on skidding versus slipping, and I talked about in a skidding turn how you'll feel your butt kind of swing on the outside of that turn because that tail's swinging on the outside. It's the same thing when you're uncoordinated, like you said, you feel your butt like swing on the outside. So coordination, like we talked about yesterday, right, is keeping that nose and that tail in line with each other. And that's how when we're correcting for adverse yaw, and that yaw is swinging you outside the turn, our nose and our tail aren't in line with each other. So we use our rudder to bring that nose back in line with the tail. So we have a coordinated turn. Next, wind. I mentioned this when we were talking about airspeed and ground speed. We have a little wind indicator down here. Like I said, it's going to show you with an arrow the direction the wind's coming from. It's going to show you an estimate of the knots of how fast the wind is coming. I find that it's really not so accurate all the time, so take it with a grain of salt. And then it shows you the magnetic heading of where that wind's coming from, and we'll get into magnetic heading a little bit later and what that means. But like I said, the arrow's pointed towards us, right, when we're talking about ground speed, so that's considered a headwind. And it's 2 knots, so it's not very strong, but that's how you would calculate ground speed, is by 2 knots minus 2 knots for the headwind that's coming towards us. And again, we'll get into that later too, but it's good to just have an overview right now of how this all applies to us in the plane. Now, in the middle, we have our HSI. This is going to be our heading indicator and also what's called our CDI. For instrument flying, this is the needle in the middle that's showing you your course. But right now with VFR flying, you'll do a little bit of VOR tracking. We'll talk about that later. But right now you're just looking at your heading indicator. So we've got a compass right here. We talked about our heading bug, how you can turn your heading bug to whatever heading your instructor is giving you. You can turn that before you start or as you start your turn, so you can follow that heading bug and arrive at your heading where you're supposed to be. And I think this is pretty self-explanatory on the heading. We can get back to it if anyone has any questions, but I'm sure you probably did some turns out in the practice area where your instructor gave you a heading to turn to and you followed using the heading bug. So we'll keep going. Systems at a glance. Okay, so right here on the left, it's showing on the left, but most of the time it's going to be on the right side of your screen next to your PFD. And I'm also, again, sure your instructor showed you when you had to fly, but this is like a condensed version of the engine page and the instrument page on what's going on. It kind of sits there off to the side if you have your moving map up on the right side of the screen. It kind of sits there off to the side, so you have an overview of what's going on with your engine, and you also need to see your RPMs when you're flying as well. So it kind of has a condensed version of that. And then I'm sure you just click with your finger, tap with your finger, and it opens up the actual full engine page, so you can see all the indications specifically. But it's nice to have the systems at a glance always at the side of your screen, so you can see what's going on with your engine. It's very important, and watching your RPMs to learn kind of what RPM setting work best for maneuvers and landing and things like that. So this is really helpful, and the only thing I feel like we need to talk about is that you can open this to the full engine page. I'm sure when you're doing your takeoff, or if you've watched your instructor do their takeoff, you pull up the full engine page to watch all the indications, and then once you're, climbed out or in cruise, then you can put that to the side for just systems at a glance while you look at your full screen for the movie map or whatever's going on. Charts. So I feel like that's like the base of what we need to know for VFR flying, because a lot of it's going to be looking outside. So there's a lot of features to this that help more with IFR flying when you're looking inside and setting flight plans and things like that. But there are charts. But it kind of goes back to right here. Can you see where I'm putting my mouse down here? Right here's like the chapter page for the charts. So it has like map, charts, flight plan, weather, terrain, lots of different options down here. And you can turn that knob at the bottom to kind of flip through different charts. So maybe while you're taxiing, your instructor showed you how to flip to the taxi map, which is really helpful for situational awareness at any airport. So you can pull that up, chart pulls up a VFR chart or an IFR. We haven't gotten into charts yet, but that's where you can find switch back from those charts based on what you're doing. I think the next one shows, if you can pull up for a specific airport, all the information from the airport, airport information, frequencies at that airport. So it'll give you ground frequency and tower frequency and ATIS frequency that you can basically click on, and it will pull that frequency right into the 650, or pull that frequency right into your COM 1 on standby, and then it will show you runway, what runways the airport has, information on how the length of the runway, what the winds are looking like, weather is delayed in the plane, weather is cool to look at, but we need to be doing full weather briefings and things before we get that. But it's nice to have as a backup if things change in the air. And then, it's going down. So it's going to show us everything. Terminal procedures does not apply to us in VFR. That's a instrument thing right now, so you don't have to worry about that. This is also sort of instrument. You might use it on your cross-country flights that you do, where you can set a flight plan into the GPS and add waypoints on your flight plan. This waypoint is the Catalina VOR, but waypoints on the flight plan can also be visual waypoints. They're set by the letters like VP, visual waypoint, and we'll talk about that when we get to sectional charts, and you can find what waypoints have already been entered into the GPS that are also visual. Because when you're doing cross-country flight planning for VFR, you're going to want to be looking outside for waypoints you're able to identify in the air, not just random invisible GPS points in the middle of nowhere. So it's also helpful to input those kind of waypoints and use your chart when you're doing cross-country, so you're able to see how far away, like we talked about. You can see your GPS up here. You can see how far away you are from your next waypoint, what's your time, your ground speed, things like that. So we'll get into more how to use this when we get to cross countries, and your instructor will definitely be showing you how to set up a flight plan for cross country. But it's a cool tool to have in here. Like they're talking again about course guidance on here. This is maybe a little bit too far, but it says GPS right here, so you're following a course on a GPS. Under GPS, there's also ground-based navigation, but we're not going to get into all that right now. There's also a direct to. See this little D with an arrow through it? That's a direct to button. If you have a waypoint on your flight plan that you want to go direct to from wherever you are, you can click that button and it will give you an indication of where to fly, so you're directly flying to that waypoint that you want to. Again, a little bit farther than we are right now, because it's a lot of cross-country flying, dealing with flight plans, but nice to be aware of to begin with. And traffic alert and awareness, it has a screen on here at the bottom for traffic alert. I'm sure, maybe not, but the practice was very, very busy yesterday. So maybe you saw an indication come up in the 650, that screen in the middle. that it pops up by itself. If anything's in your area, it will show like traffic 200 feet below or traffic this way, whatever. So you don't necessarily have to have this screen up at all times or need to be looking at it, because the 650 takes care of that, of any impending traffic on you. And then of course, I'm sure your instructor showed you, our moving map is able to see all other traffic in the area that have their ADSB out indication. So that's showing you, you could probably see that has the tail number on the top, and it has like a plus minus in feet. So that's telling you their altitude in relation to yours, which is really helpful for traffic awareness to see if they're 1,000 feet below you, maybe no factor, you don't have to worry about them. But if it says, you know, minus 0.3, that's 300 feet from you. You probably need to be looking out for them close to you. Yeah, this is the detailed system page that I talked about. So when you click on that to open it, it looks different than than this and our plane. It's gonna say fuel down here in the left, and then it's gonna say electric on the bottom over here. So it looks a little bit different, but you get the idea. If you have a more detailed page for your systems that gives you more detailed information than just kind of in the green over here is what you're looking for, that everything's in the green.
Here is practice with these panels up here. It's got a great G3X on it. There are a bunch of them out in the hangar. If you want to take a closer look at everything that we're going over here and run through your checklist there. And they also have them at dispatch if you want to like buy one, bring one home. I think a lot of the sling houses like actually have one already set up in there, but yeah, just staring at that over and over and over for hours is kind of helpful.
It's
And-
great to practice emergency procedure flows. Once we get to that, I'm sure your instructor is already starting that since you're flying. You want to be aware of that as early as possible. So if you have your checklist, you can go on that emergency page and it has the flow of what you do during emergency. Go to one of these boards and just run through the checklist. I mean, at first you're going to be slow and it's going to be like one after the other, but once you get it, it will be kind of a flow that immediately happens in response to an emergency. And then you'll go back and verify with your checklist. Okay, I did this, I did this, I did this, check on all of that. But in the beginning, use your checklist. You're like, okay, switching fuel tanks. Okay, fuel pumps verified on. Kind of go run through the whole thing so it will feel natural in the plane where you're not kind of looking around like, okay, where's the next thing that I press, and having to spend a lot of time looking at the checklist. It really helps you like keep a good foundation for how to respond in emergencies, so it feels like second nature to respond instead of pulling out the checklist and going line by line on each item, because we want to get through that as soon as possible, especially with an engine failure. The flow to try to restart the engine is very fast, or it's very short, so you're able to get through it very fast and you can just automatically respond and then go and verify on the checklist that you completed each one of those tasks. So
It'll
Yeah.
save you hours too
oh yeah.
if you run through your startup and your run up checklist like 10 times on this, especially like right before you go flying, it'll save you probably like 4 or 5 minutes, which is, you know, hours. So over the long haul, it'll save you time to practice on this.
Did you want to,
Yeah.
we're moving on to the
Yeah, sure.
engine, so we can kind of break in the middle of the PowerPoint here.
Great. Hello, everyone. I didn't meet you on.
Do you need the computer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm Paul, chief instructor here. I was at Santa Monica during the end doc, so I was doing, you know, introducing everybody at Santa Monica. So I didn't get to meet you guys on Friday, but hey, welcome. I'm Paul. Been flying with Sling. I looked at my logbook yesterday. I think my first Sling flight was like in 2017. Flew a Sling 4 the first one in 2000, or the first one in the US in 2017. And been flying a lot of slings since then, but I started as a chief instructor about 2 years ago here. And yeah, so if you have any questions about flying, got like a lot of experience. I've flown everything too, not just slings. Feel free to hit me up. Let's see. So I'm going to go and try to find. Today I want to talk to you about kind of two different things. One is 141 program. You guys all just started, but there's most sling. We do have a certificate from the FAA to do what we call 141 training, or to train as a pilot school, as opposed to Part 61 training, which most people are in, which is more as you go kind of training, not as defined. I'll talk about that today. And then also I'll talk about how to track your progress through the program, to make sure that you have a good idea of what's keeping you on track. And if you're struggling anywhere or not, how to identify that. Pretty much every student will end up struggling at some point. In fact, like if there's any point during the that you feel like, oh, this is easy, there's something you're probably not doing, because you should always feel overwhelmed by all the information you need to do, all the tasks that you need to do, all the maneuvers you need to fly. You should always feel overwhelmed, you know. Kyle, would you agree with that? Uh,
The constant progress, and you have to have pretty constant motivation to keep you progressing through the program.
right, and Kyle asked, help keep me on task. It's 9:45 now. I want to do maybe like half an hour of that. So, let's see. So, today for the 141 part, I'll talk about the purpose of the 141, what the difference between 141 and 61 are, and what the course requirements are for 141. 141 is a set of regulations. You see 91s all over the place. You see 61s all over the place. You see 141s all over the place. And there's 120, 121, 135. They're all different sections of the Code of Federal Regulations as they relate to aviation space. Like Chapter 14 is all aviation in space. Let's see. But 141 is one section of that. So we are a pilot school. We were awarded an air agency certificate from the FAA. We were the first school to get one of these in the Long Beach FSDO, which is kind of like a really big FSDO in the last 20 years. They don't give these things out very easily. And yeah, that's why it's been 20 years since we've given one out. It takes a lot of work, a lot of development of curriculum, a lot of showing that you have the ability to move students through a program, and they have to be successful, and you have to provide a whole bunch of documentation and go through a bunch of FAA inspections. They come here, visit the site, and whatnot. They're going to come here next week and do an inspection of our facility. Usually the FAA is out probably once a month doing an inspection. I talk to them probably 4 or 5 times a week on the phone, via email. And who here has heard of a ramp check? Nobody? Ramp check is when it's like, I wouldn't say it's like being pulled over, but it's kind of like when somebody from the FAA just comes up to you and say, hey, what are you doing today? What lesson are you flying? You know, who's your instructor? Who here has a student pilot certificate already? All right, you guys, who here applied for a student pilot certificate? Did everybody apply? If you haven't applied for one, you have to apply for one. they'll ask for that. They'll ask, well, student pilots, it's usually okay. But like if you ever show up without a pilot certificate, medical and stuff like that, yeah, they will, that, that won't work. That won't work here. And like I said, the FAA is out here like, you know, once a month and they'll do ramp checks and they're very nice. I work with them all the time. They want to promote aviation, but we work with them. So they gave us a certificate, which was hard to get, but we've got it. And so that means we can teach in a 141 cents private pilot instrument rating, commercial, additional category and class sets, multi-engine, flight instructor, and flight instructor instrument course. We didn't have one for multi-engine instructor yet, but we'll work on that. Part 61, like legally speaking, part 61 is just you and a flight instructor, and the flight instructor can fly whatever they want. But if you show up to a check ride with the knowledge, skill, and experience and take a check ride, then that's great. So you don't have to follow a syllabus or anything like that. Part 6. That being said, here at Sling, we kind of did. Who here has flown at other flight schools before coming here? Raise your hands. You have. Yeah, was it 61 or 141? 61. And was it like small school, big school? And basically you and an instructor kind of self-directed? Oh, okay. Okay. Is Candy Robinson still there? So she like she was the owner forever. How about Susan Baker? She runs everything there. I don't know. It's been a year since I've been there. Okay. All right. So 141, what's a purpose of it? So the philosophy of the 141 is that it's for accelerated flight training. And the way you can get through through the flight training at an accelerated rate is that you go through it with building blocks. You follow a syllabus. The syllabus has to be FAA approved and it has to make sense. So so our syllabus is FAA approved. You can find it in ForeFlight in the document section. You should have gotten it sent to you. We did have an enrollment weirdness, but you should have gotten it emailed to you when you enrolled on Friday. But some people might not have gotten that, but make sure you follow the syllabus, okay? Or read through the syllabus. For students, why would a student want to be 141? It's more accelerated. It's fewer hours, especially in instrument rating. But in most ratings, we find that students go through with fewer hours. That's because your progress is rigorously tracked. And when there's issues, we can get to them earlier, right? Also, other reasons why 141 is useful is because if you're an international student, you can get a visa, and then certain loans require you to be 141. For those of you who are on Sally Mae, they need you to move through the program at an accelerated rate, and so 141 it like kind of fits hand in hand with that because you should because we do track how long it takes to go through there pretty rigorously. For the CFIs, it's a lot easier for them because they can give you better training because they stick to the course. The CFIs have to stick to the course, have to go through each lesson, have to do each task. It's easier to have other instructors fill in for them because they can see your progress in Flight Schedule Pro and they can say, what was the last lesson they did? What's the next lesson that they're going to do? And so if another instructor comes in, it's like already predefined what they're going to do. And it's easier for the CFI to also track their students' progress. And it looks better on their resume if they're 141 instructor. And they have to meet certain requirements to be a 141 instructor above and beyond being a flight instructor. Let's see. For us at Sling, we believe we can provide better training through those who are in 141. And, one of our main goals in 141 is to get examining authority. If we have just a few more students go through our 141 program and they are successful, then we can apply for a certificate where you don't have to take a check ride with a DPE. You do an end of course test with one of our check instructors, and we can issue the pilot certificate, right? And so we're not there yet, but we're working on that. And I think that's a big advantage because there's no check ride wait times. There's also no DPEs, they do follow a strict standard on what they test on, but there are sometimes idiosyncrasies in how they do it sometimes. And we would keep things a little bit more standard, in my opinion. Any questions so far? And by the way, everybody here now is enrolled in Part 61. That's just the way that we start out. But I'll tell you about 141, and you can choose to enroll in 141. Let's see. Some differences between 61 and 141. Currently, we give a little bit of check ride priority to the 141 students. That's because after the final progress check, you get a graduation certificate from us, and you have to take that check ride with a DPE within 60 days. And what that really means to me is you should take that check ride within 30 days for sure, so that if you need to go back to redo 1 or 2 or 20 tasks, that you can do that within the 60 days. Usually we try to schedule them less than 2 weeks in advance. Sometimes that's hard, but the 141 students do get that priority. Leads to better student outcomes. We have a 96% first time pass rate with our 141 students. Let's see, fewer hours per certificate. Definitely that is the case on the instrument rating. That's often the case with the private rating as well, or on average, it's the case with the private as well. We do have some students who do take longer. We do have some that take shorter, but on average, it's a lot less for instrument rating, and it's a little bit less for private. And one of the biggest things to me is that it kind of 141 versus 61, and it rearranges when you get experience versus when you get skills and knowledge. And it gives you the skills and knowledge. That's kind of like tools in your tool belt before it requires you to get a lot more experience. You can get your pilot certificate, your skills and knowledge with fewer hours, and then you can, do more of your cross-country flying later and get experience after you get your pilot certificates, right? And then, I mentioned examining authority in the future. One thing about the examining authority too, like if your final progress check counts as the end of course test, you don't have a check ride, right? And if you don't have a check ride, then if somebody asks you, did you ever fail a check ride? The answer is going to be no. So, by definition.
Do you guys have a time when you think that
For private pilot, it's looking like probably 6 to 8 months from now. For instrument, it's looking closer to like 4 months from now. In order to get that examining authority, you have to just have more students go through the program, right? So at the end of this, I'm giving you the information now. I'm not I'm not selling it yet, but in the end, I'll probably spend like 3 minutes trying to sell it to you because I do want more people in 141. But before I get to selling it to you, I'll give you all the information. Some big differences between the two. Part 61, you can move around in the syllabus all you want. In Part 61, you don't even need to have a syllabus. Here at Sling, we do have a syllabus, but you don't even need to adhere to it. and 61. 141, you have to strictly adhere to the syllabus. That means you do, lesson 1 before lesson 2, before lesson 3. It makes sense to me because if you look at the details of what's done on first flight, second flight, third flight, that's why I'm like kind of surprised. Like, not all of you have done the coordination exercises or touch rolls, because like that is in 141, that it's a requirement that you do that at the beginning. And you know what? It's kind of important that you learn that. So, but in 61, you don't have to do that. You don't have to strictly adhere to the syllabus. 141, you do. It establishes good building blocks though, because like you want to make sure you get the basics down before you go and do, more complicated stuff. It is fun to see the more complicated stuff. So it's kind of exciting as a student. It's kind of exciting as a flight instructor to like bring people along earlier, but sometimes that like can help it so your building blocks are not like, really ingrained in that you can do things in your sleep, right? Imagine if you were like if you were driving around on the freeway, but you're like not very good at holding your place in the lane, like, and you just have to put all your concentration on like this all the time. Well, that's because you don't have good building blocks. Same thing in flying, right? So strict adherence to syllabus is kind of like big to me. The hours. So the minimum hours for private is 40 and 61, 35 and 141. Nobody in Los Angeles ever hits that. That being said, so people are usually coming in around like 70-ish or mid 70s. That being said, though, when you follow the syllabus kind of well, and you focus actually right at the beginning on a lot of the basic stuff, you will end up using less hours, right? Instrument rating 35 hours versus 50 hours for instruments in 61. We definitely do see people do a lot fewer hours in instrument than in private. And then for commercial, you have to have 250 total versus 141. You need 120 hours, but that's in the course. So from when you start the commercial course to when you finish it, it's 120 hours. Yeah, so commercial, sometimes it might be a little bit more advantageous to do part 61. And you can do you can do 61 and 141 for each course differently, right? Private, you can do a 61 private, a 141 instrument, and a 61 commercial, or any mixture thereof. Progress checks. We just updated our syllabus to include 4 progress checks in private and instrument, similar to what we have in 141. I'd say in 141, we do have a little bit more adherence to making sure you meet the requirements for each progress check. Check rides with the DPE currently, it's also with 141 with the DPE, but it gets prioritized. Certification requirements. So the qualifications for being able to get to a check ride, the DP ends up like going through your logbook, checking like, hey, what time was sunset on this day that you did landings at night, all sorts of they spend a long time going through your logbook in part 61. Part 141, they don't have to check your logbook. You show up with a graduation certificate outside. I graduated from a pilot school, and they have a syllabus, and we followed the syllabus. So the DP doesn't really have to check your logbook for all the crazy details that they do for part 61. That being said, the DPs usually check the logbook, but it's not like the craziness that they do. All they really need is a graduation certificate. And it's, that being said, it's on us to make sure that all of your training is up to requirements. So it's not the DP, it's our job. So somebody's got to still check that, but we have a computer system for that. And then finally, let's see, first time pass rate. We get about an 84% first time pass rate on check rides for part 61. We've got a 96 pass rate for 141. So tend to do a little bit better there. Let's see, any questions? All right, let's see. So experience requirements, part 61, again, 40 hours. For 141, it's 35. And the way that breaks down is, it's kind of very similar everywhere else, except for solo hours. Solo, we have to have 5 hours in 141, whereas 61, it's got to be 10 hours. That being said, you have to follow the syllabus, and there are like multiple solo flights. You'll be over 4 hours. You'll be over 5 hours for sure following the syllabus. Yeah. Another weirdness is it says cross country 100 nautical miles. The long cross country, the long cross country for 61 is 150 nautical miles. I would say fly 150 nautical miles, even if you're doing 141 just in general. It's easier to do it that way. But that is one difference. Who has looked at the syllabus and kind of seen how the whole private course is broken down yet? Who here you have? Good. Anybody else? Yes? Huh?
Looked over it.
You looked over it? Okay. You'll want to really know that. So private is 10 phases, right? Each phase has different lessons or scenarios, they call them. Phase 1, learning your airplane's got 3 lessons, phase 2, 4, phase 3, 3, and so on. And multiple stages as well, right? So you'll want to keep them in mind as you're going through. We also have progress checks. Phase 2, we have a progress check where it's just like, hey, can you fly the airplane straight and level, climb, descend, things like that. Before you get into takeoffs and landings and preparing for solo flight. But yeah, we've got multiple progress checks in there. Let's see, some other requirements you have to have. Okay, so one of the things for private, you have to have your student pilot cert. That's actually before the pre-solo progress check. When you do go through a progress check in 141, we have to make sure all your lessons prior to that progress check are complete. That's not a requirement in 61. You can skip lessons, you can repeat lessons, you can go to a lesson you can do a cross country before you do a solo with your instructor. I wouldn't recommend that, but you can do that, right? There's no requirement for that, but 141, you got to make sure they're all complete. All the lessons have to have hours and landings and details logged. And if you do any lessons out of order, you can do them out of order, but they have to be explained in the comments. It can be like, oh, you know what? The weather in the practice area was overcast, so we did takeoffs and landings this day. Or it was a beautiful sunny day all day. The forecast was great. We decided that we'd do a cross country on this day rather than doing the steep turns practice. You can do them a little bit out of order, but you have to have an explanation. And then these requirements are kind of the same. Pre-solo written has to be in Flight Schedule Pro for a pre-solo progress check. Makes sense, right? And before your cross country, you have to have your FAA written done. But 141 does require like positive documentation of all of this. We'll skip instrument rating. The one thing I'll say about instrument rating is that for the instrument rating, you only need 35 hours. You do not need 50 hours of cross country. So for your instrument rating in part 61, you need 50 hours cross country. This is what I was talking about like getting the experience before you have the skills in the training, right? So for 61, they want you to have that. Here in 141, they say, you don't need it. So that's why people end up getting the instrument rating in a lot less time. Is that you only need the 35 hours of hood time, right? And you don't need all that cross country time. To me, it makes a lot more sense. Any questions about the private requirements? 141. Yeah.
Say good time, what is that?
Hood time, good question. So hood time is when you're flying in an airplane, but you've got the foggles on,
Yeah.
or yeah,
Okay.
I call it maybe nobody uses hoods anymore, but it used to be like almost like a baseball cap that goes down.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
But foggles, yeah. View limiting device. All right. Some things about transferring between 61 and 141. Transferring from 61 into 141, you can do it. But if you get too far in your program, it gets harder and it might not make sense because you can only transfer up to 25% of the minimum requirements in terms of hours. So that's like if you've flown, 10 hours, you can only transfer 8.75 hours of that towards your graduation requirement. That being said, another way to look at it is you only need 35 hours to graduate. So you only need 27 hours to finish it. 26 hours, something like that. 27 hours. Not sure there's a decimal in there. It's thrown me off. 26, 25. Okay. So 26, 25. So 26 hours. So you only need 26 hours to complete it. So let's say you've flown 20 hours, but you're probably going to take 70 hours to get your private. Well, you'll definitely get your 26.25 hours in the rest of it. So you can do that transfer, and it's not like those hours disappear or anything like that. You still have them in your logbook. But it's just, you're above this 25%. You can still do it. But in our system, it'll say, you transferred in, 8.75 hours. Yeah. So this is a guy who went through and he came in, he transferred when he had 43 hours of dual instruction, but we only credited him for 8.75. Still, he did fine. He did great, actually, when he transferred in. And he transferred in at phase 3, scenario 2. So that's maybe 3.5 weeks in. No, that's the wrong syllabus. Phase 3. So he transferred in pre-solo area, right? Somewhere around here. So you can transfer in, but it gets harder the farther down. In the private syllabus, I would say if you want to transfer in, you'd want to do that definitely before, phase 4, I would suggest. But you guys are all starting now, so you can do it right now. Let's see. Yeah, and there are a couple of other requirements as well. You have to make a write-up like this, or I have to. Going to 61 from 141, you can transfer out at any time. It's easy to do. You can go through the whole 141 syllabus and say, you know what, I'm going to take apart 61 tech ride because my logbook is so great. And I don't know, and you can do that. But so, yeah, it's very easy to go back to 61. If you do terminate an enrollment in 141, I do ask that you send an email that says, I'd like to do it. You don't have to give a reason. If we can also terminate your 141, it's very rare, but we've done it before. Student doesn't show up for 3 months and it's okay, well, we're going to terminate the enrollment. But we usually have to give a reason. Yeah, I think that's about all I have on 61 and 141. Any questions? Yeah,
So
Spencer.
if you decide to transfer to 141, do you recommend doing it before we get that 8.75 hours? That way we don't lose hours for our rating. We still have the flight hours, but then we're losing hours towards that rating, correct?
I would say it depends. And so if you want to do it, I'd say once you figure out you want to do it. It's earlier is better in my opinion.
Yeah.
But even in this scenario where, this student had 43 hours.
Yeah. But you guys credited him for the minimum, which was 875, right?
We credited him for 8.75.
Yeah, and he was already at the solo area,
Yeah,
so he's already
but
pretty far in.
he's pretty far in. Yeah, so you can do that
But
later on.
35 minimum hours to hit your PPL.
Exactly.
So
So we only needed 26 more hours.
yeah, and you said most people hit it at 70 anyway, so he was still technically on track with the
Exactly.
cert, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a little more freedom. And then anyway, you need 120 for commercial 141, right?
Yeah.
Rather than 250 at 60.
So the way they allocate those hours are different. For 61, you need 250 total time.
Okay.
And for 141, you need 120 hours in the course. So
Okay.
that means 120 hours after you finish your instrument rating.
Okay. Really? Thank you.
Yeah. And so, like, if you finish your instrument rating with 110 hours total, then
You're just under.
you could get your commercial at 230. Question.
Do like when the airline look at 141, 61 differently?
Yeah. 141 is generally thought of as like more rigorous and more well, it's absolutely by regulation more structured. So yeah, they'd look at it as like better. Question.
What will there be?
Do the transfer. You can send an email to chiefs@slingpilotacademy.com and copy over operations@slingpilotacademy.com. Should I write that down?
Yes, please.
Right by the bottom.
On the computer. Okay.
Did you do 61 or 140? You never switch? Like, you didn't have the option at all?
Commercial workers, five.
Do you feel like you had any struggles with check rights doing 60? Yeah. Yeah, because did it feel a little too unstructured?
No, the problem was getting. To come and get.
Yeah.
The actual check ride. For the instructors who are doing phase checks were. It's gonna be
It's huge.
it was huge, a huge help, and they're also gonna be more difficult. Doing those phase checks and the actual check ride ended up being, so it's a great preparation. But it was a problem to get scheduled, because if it's all, whatever time you are ready for the check ride, it's kind of up in the air of who's available,
When
who's
they're
coming,
available.
yeah. Yeah, they like to have, they like to have people seen in all times, but it's really up in the air to kind of luck on if you have all your requirements done and you're ready and you hope that someone is hopefully scheduled to go. So it's a big check. I don't think I wait more than 3 weeks, I think.
You feel that extra like 3 weeks kind of helped you double check yourself that you were actually ready.
Because if I had done check rides immediately, it's really what I think I would have been less prepared. Like something just a little over prepared.
Yeah.
Sometimes the extra time finishing all the requirements and then having that time to just focus on getting check ride ready.
Yeah.
Before the check ride was helpful, but other times people feel differently and they just want to get it done as soon as they enter the ride. So it's a personal thing.
I think with 141, you kind of roll into the check ride a little. Maybe.
I think so. I don't. This is the guy with all the 141 information, since I wasn't part of that program, but
Yeah, we tried to schedule
yeah.
it. I mean,
Like you said, we have preferred, but it's really up to the availability. Right?
so it is still up to DP availability.
Yeah.
And but we have to give preference to the 141 students because that graduation certificate expires, right? You have to have that check ride within 60 days, which means you really if you take a check ride and unfortunately there's a weather delay, you know, you're not feeling well, the DP's not feeling well, something happens, you have to have time to be able to reschedule it
Yeah.
and take it. And I like to have the ability to do 3 check ride events before that certificate expires. So that's why we try to do it like, you know, about 2 weeks out.
The 2 weeks still gives us time to little over prep a little bit.
I mean, if you go through the end of course check, to me, if you do an end of course test, you're ready for the check ride. Our end of course test should be more rigorous than a check ride. So, I mean, you should be able to take a check ride the day after. And that's why, you know, once we have the examining authority, the FAA says you don't even need a check ride.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we need to have more students go through check rides. And that's kind of like proof to the FAA that we're doing well. And then we also have to have a 90% pass rate, first time pass rate for check rides, right? Which proves to the FAA that we're making quality students before they can give us the exam.
Yeah.
There, and all of this is in regulations. You can look it up in, you know, 14 CFR 141 if you're into that.
On the report said below, yeah. Is that the 8710 report or is it the next one through?
The if you're using ForeFlight, it should just be something. It might say 2-page, or yeah, yeah. And the reason we do that is just to give you the credit up to 8.75 hours, and then start you like so you don't have to repeat lesson 1, lesson 2. Thanks for all the questions, guys. It was great. So I also want to talk a little bit about your question. Sorry.
Would you keep your instructor typically?
Usually. So yeah, one thing is if you look at the our instructor list, some of them have like a parentheses 141 next to them, some don't. If your instructor doesn't, I can make them a 141 instructor. They have to do a little bit more training. And we have to do a proficiency check with them. So they have to fly with the chief or an assistant chief and go through a normal lesson. And but once we satisfy those 2 things, then they'll become a 141 instructor. So it usually takes like maybe 4 or 5 days. Yeah. Sure.
How come we wouldn't automatically use 141?
So I was kind of advocating for that a little bit, but since it's so rigorous and structured, and since not all of our instructors are Part 61, we said, you know what, we'll enroll everybody in 61 and then we'll tell them about the differences. If you go to like, say, Emory-Riddle, University of North Dakota, Cal Aero, something like that, they just enroll you in 141, you know, because that's their program. We give you a little bit more choice here. Yeah, question.
How would the course structure?
So the structure, I would say that the syllabus doesn't change, right? But adherence to the syllabus changes it a little bit. You're like in 61, your instructor has flexibility to move around and say, hey, you know what, let's do a lot of this today, or let's do a lot of that. They can miss tasks too, things like that. So I would say the rigor is what's different, not necessarily the syllabus itself.
So I noticed in the syllabus, it says that we should, I'm assuming it's just gonna get more rigorous for 141, but it says we should be ready to solo by like week 4. Personally, for myself, I would see myself doing that in 4 weeks. And since right now we aren't doing examiners here, we will have to go check ride.
Yeah.
And if we're not ready, we gotta go up to trying to stay on track. And knock on wood, I do plan.
So you don't have to do it in 4 weeks so you want to keep on track, you want to meet your goals. But we expect it to be closer to 3 months when people get their private, which means by phase 5, it'll probably be closer to like, it can be closer to like 6 weeks or so. But us tracking your progress and figuring out if there's an issue or not, it's we won't like kick you out if you don't, if you're not doing it in 4 weeks. It's but that's the goal. And we'll see as you go through each lesson, we'll see like, oh, is this lesson had to be repeated, or this lesson, and believe me, everybody repeats lessons. It's not. I'll go into the tracking in Flight Schedule Pro a little bit now too, and it applies to both 61 and 141. Was there another question? Yes.
Is there a price difference?
Price difference? No. Yeah. Let's see. Students, well, so there's no price difference, but to get your instrument rating, if you do it in 40 hours versus, having the minimum 550 cross country for your instrument rating, it'll be done in less hours. That being said, to get your commercial, you still need 50 hours of cross country. So you'll end up picking up those 50 hours later on in your commercial training. Which in my opinion is a better time to do a lot of your cross countries. Once you got all the tools in your belt, then you're starting to use them. You wouldn't want to like build a house when like you have a hammer and no nails. I don't know. Which one's the instrument rating? The nails or the hammer? I don't know. All right. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. Sure.
With sling, for like instructor candidacy, they look at arts differently.
I think so, yeah. I would definitely, well, I do the hiring, and so I do. Let's see. I'm gonna try to do like, give me 5 more minutes, because this part is like kind of really key. You guys need to be a very active part of tracking our progress through the program. We have Flight Schedule Pro. Use the web page. Don't use the app. Use the web page and go into there's a tab here that usually says training. You want to select course enrollments, and then you want to select private pilot course, and it'll throw you up on this course summary page. You'll want to look at that. There's like overview, sessions, progress, exams, documents. Progress is the best tab to see how you're doing. It'll have the lessons on the left side, and it'll have all the sessions where you flew those lessons there. It lines up with the King syllabus. Here's kind of like the diagram of the stages and phases and the descriptions of each phase, right? Then the day before your flights, you'll want to go through all that stuff, right? To get yourself to the course progress page, and you'll see, oh, I finished my first flight, green C on it. I finished controlling the airplane, green C there. Next lesson is increasing awareness. Click on that, and it'll give you a description of the lesson. It'll have the objectives of the lesson, where you're going, and all the tasks that you do there, right? You look at each one of these tasks, there's a task here that says steep turns. You go to the airplane flying handbook, pull up the section on steep turns, learn about how you're supposed to fly them. Look at the airman certification standards for steep turns, and it has all the references for that. And it also says what skills you need to do in that maneuver. Do this the day before so you know like exactly what it is, what this maneuver is, what is expected. Okay. The day of your flight, review the lesson contents again. You know, make it fresh in your memory. Of course, look at the weather, do your pre-flight action, which is like weight and balance, check the plane for squawks, things like that. But you'll want to do that. And then review the completion standards for each maneuver. You'll want to make sure you know what you're doing before the flight. That way, when you're in the plane, you're just doing something that you've already prepared for, and it's almost like practice as opposed to like learning. Because believe me, when you get, well, who here thinks they're like smarter when there's a giant fan turning and like all sorts of lights and switches and stuff like that? Yeah, definitely not. So like your ability to take in the information is a lot lower. So if you take it in before you get in a plane and it's just reminding you of what you've already gone over, and you know what, watch YouTube videos on it too. Like, so you guys have all done the Kings, but it's just really helpful, helps you make every hour count. That's kind of a big thing. Make every hour in the plane count. After the flight, pull up the training session details and it'll show what your, I hate that there are red X's there, but that just basically means like, well, you got it, but you didn't get it up to like the level that we expect of you at this point. So it gives you what to go over for next flight, right? And what you might need to pick up. But definitely keep an eye on your progress through, and that's all I have, but you'll want to use Flight Schedule Pro to keep an eye on your progress. Make sense? And yeah, you have to be an active part of that. And ask your instructor questions. If you jump from like, you know, from controlling the airplane to takeoffs and landings, ask your instructor, hey, why are we working on this? Because believe me, that's a big jump. Maybe you're a rock star, but there's probably something that you missed in there. You know. All right. Sorry, I took up a lot of your time. If you have questions, send it to Chiefs. Yeah, go ahead.
Are these slides?
These slides, I can put them on the, or I can send them to the there. Yeah, absolutely. And oh, by the way, welcome to Sling. Sorry it wasn't there on Friday. It's very, very exciting. It's amazing.
We have about 30 minutes, get through how the piston engine works, and then of course we can let it run a little bit into tomorrow. Tomorrow is a long day of all sling systems specific, so hopefully you got a lot of this from King School, so we can kind of run through this pretty fast today and then spend a lot more time tomorrow on sling systems. I have a bunch of people who want to sit in on sling system class tomorrow and about maybe 2 empty seats in here, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, let's see how far we can get on these slides. Okay, starting off simple, we kind of already talked about it. Power plant produces thrust to propel the aircraft forward, right? So most small aircraft are designed with a reciprocating engine. So we're basically converting chemical energy into mechanical energy, chemical being fuel, mechanical energy being the pistons moving. So where the engine's gonna take fuel and air and combine them to create combustion through the pistons. The pistons through combustion are going to create movement, and then that movement of the pistons is going to turn the crankshaft, and the crankshaft is what ultimately is turning our propeller, creating thrust, producing thrust through the propeller. So very simple overview. We'll get into exactly how all this simply works, but cylinders, that's where the combustion is taking place in. That's where our pistons are creating combustion inside. It's the driving force spins the prop. Two-stroke or four-stroke, pretty much all machines, like vehicles, are going to be four-stroke engines. So in our plane, we have a four-stroke system, built to withstand high temperatures. Feel like we got this picture. This is actually of the sling engine, the Rotax engine. So cylinders are right here. This little green. This is the cylinder right here. So we have two. I think we get into this, but we have components of a cylinder. Okay. So we have the little picture, and we have an intake valve. I guess I'm gonna use my mouse. We have an intake valve here, exhaust valve on the other side. We have two spark plugs, always for redundancy in aviation. So if one fouls or that means stops working for any reason, the second spark plug, and they always fire at the same time. So if one doesn't fire, that other one's always going to be there. They don't alternate back and forth. They're always firing together. It also produces, more power for the engine. So two is always better than one when we're talking about systems or aircraft. Two fuel injectors, same reason in certain models. One piston, that's this whole piece right here. The piston's moving up and down. And then the connecting rod inside each cylinder directed towards the crankshaft. So don't love this picture, but I do love okay, I guess we'll get there, but there's an actual moving diagram on here that makes it really easy to understand. So we'll get through. We have an opposed engine setup. It means horizontally opposed. Tomorrow when we go through sling systems, there's like an acronym for all the main components of the sling engine. And one of them is like H for horizontally opposed. We have a horizontally opposed engine, which means the four cylinders are faced away from each other. It's like a flatter design instead of a taller. It's basically a safe space to keep the cowling of the engine smaller, more aerodynamic. Basically, I think they say it's used to keep the engine bay minimal. But yeah, we'll get into more of horizontally opposed engine. That's what our sling has. Four-stroke cycle. So we have 4 cylinders and a 4-stroke cycle working all at the same time. So in each cylinder, this is what's happening. We have the intake, the compression, the power, and the exhaust. A lot of people like to say we have the suck, squeeze, bang, blow. It is what it is, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of words here that I don't want to read. So we're gonna look at the cool picture. See this thing? Whoa, that's crazy. I really like that. But we'll look first at step by step what's happening. So intake stroke, the suck. So we're sucking in that air and fuel mixture. That intake valve that we showed on the last slide opens. The piston comes down, creating that suction. So when the intake valve opens, that fuel air mixture gets sucked into the piston or drawn into the cylinder, into the piston. Then we're talking about the compression stroke. That's going to be the squeeze. So the intake valve then closes, cuts off all the other air and fuel mixture that could be there. And then the piston moves up, compressing everything that just came in. Like you can see this little blue right here. That's all of it compressed up at the top. So that's the squeeze. And then the power stroke, the spark plug that's connected up here is going to ignite that mixture, creating power that's going to push down the piston back down. So we're going up and down, up and down, up and down the whole time. So as soon as that ignites, it pushes that piston, forces it back down, and then the exhaust blow out, meaning the gas that's produced through the tiny little explosion comes back out through the exhaust valve and also moves the piston back up. So up, down is what we're looking at. Just like this, and it's happening constantly. to keep the engine running smooth. So we can see through the bottom of this, every time it moves up and down, it's moving this rod that's connected to this whole thing is the crankshaft. So you can kind of think of it as like kind of pedaling up and down, that's actually spinning the prop, like the prop would be connected up here, that's what's spinning the prop crankshaft mechanism down here, and all the pistons are moving that crankshaft around so we get our prop spinning. I like this picture. Then induction systems. So that's our air from the outside of the plane is coming into the cylinders. We have this is how we get our air for the fuel air mixture. We're gonna have two systems with the sling. I can't believe we still have the carburetor systems. It's kind of it's a special type of carburetor system, but Sling has a fuel injected system and a modified carburetor system. The fuel injected system is going to be our IS. So anytime you see the planes that end in IS, that's our fuel injected. That's pretty much every single plane on the line. And then we have the modified carburetor system. Those are our ULS planes. I think there's only 2 on the line right now, so fun if you get one of those Tango whiskeys, but otherwise you're working with a fuel injected system. So the difference is with the carburetor system, the fuel air mixture is mixed inside the carburetor and then it enters the intake manifold. The fuel injected system mixes immediately before it enters each cylinder, or it's injected directly into each cylinder. With Sling, it's mixed right before. So it is fuel injected, but it's not directed or it's not injected directly in. We have the type of fuel injection where it's mixed just before and then pulled into the cylinder. But we'll get into that with Sling systems, but carbureted system, there's a lot more words here. So very old system in a lot of engines, and they don't rely. That's the biggest thing with Sling that we'll talk about tomorrow with Sling systems is our engine relies on that we have a working generator. We have 2 generators in Sling that we'll get to, but it is an electrical system that if we lose our electrical system, we have lost our engine. It's very unique. As it's talking about in here, it's very unique. Most of the time, those are separate. You don't rely on electronics to fuel, but also less fuel efficient than other engines. That's why Sling is chosen to do it this way, because we basically have a computer that's deciding all of our engine calibration all the time, working to choose exactly how much fuel it wants to take, a precise amount based on all these sensors that the computer's constantly tracking. So it's very fuel efficient, but it does have its issues, and we'll get into that. But carburetor system, like it's talking about, has a throttle lever, whatever that fuel mixture as well. So that's that. In pictures, you have a black throttle in Cessnas or Pipers, and then you have a red knob throttle next to it. If you've never flown another plane other than Sling, you wouldn't have seen it, but mixture control is something we don't have in the Sling. The computer decides the mixture for it, especially it's kind of nice because a lot of times with a mixture, actual lever, whatever the pronunciation is, moving that is based on where you are in the plane, based on altitude. So we know the air gets less dense the higher in altitude we go. So we have to what they call lean and enrich the mixture. And we'll talk it has an actual picture that makes sense on here on how it pulls the fuel based on that. So we'll keep going with this. Yeah, pilot controlled in carburetor systems. But in the Sling, which again we'll talk about tomorrow, the modified carburetor system in the ULS does not have a mixture knob that you have to. It's not pilot controlled either. It's also decided by the plane itself. So, little diagram to go over how the carburetor system works. So, we have the throttle valve here, or like this plate, this throttle plate right here. This is connected to your throttle that you're moving inside the plane, pilot controlled. You also have a mixture needle right here. That's how you change the mixture inside the plane. That's connected to the red knob that you're moving inside the plane as well. So you have air inlets here at the bottom that are bringing in air. We talked about the Venturi yesterday, I think, and how the Venturi works here. So it's pulling air into here, and then we have our little discharge nozzle right here that's fed to this needle inside the float chamber where the fuel sits. So it has a fuel inlet that brings in fuel. The float chamber, this little floating device, keeps it level, keeps the level of the fuel in there. And then we have this needle that moves up and down and allows fuel, however much you choose, to be sent through to the discharge nozzle where it releases whatever amount of fuel that you selected into the Venturi to mix with the air that's coming through the air inlet. And then that mixture sent through the Venturi is sped up, as we know, and the pressure is decreased, and that's sent through the throttle valve. It's kind of opening and closing however much, depending on whether you're pushing the throttle in or out. It opens the valve and releases however much you chose into the combustion chambers to be burned. Does this make sense? Do we all probably go over this before? Okay. So, okay, we're good. Carburetor icing, again, a lot of words. Can we look at a picture? Okay. So carburetor icing happens because of that Venturi effect that we talked about yesterday. So because we have that air and fuel being mixed inside the Venturi, what's happening when the pressure decreases, it's also cooling the temperature to, I think it can be up to 30 degrees cooler inside that Venturi than the outside air temperature. So that's why back here on this slide, it's saying even at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, icing can occur inside the carburetor because you have visible moisture or high humidity that's bringing in those water particles. And inside the engine, it's cooling, or inside the combustion chamber, the Venturi, or inside the carburetor. Oh God, there's so many words. Inside the carburetor in the Venturi, as it's speeding up that fuel air mixture, it's cooling it down at the same time. That's why you see here, and it's building up that ice. If there's visible moisture in there, it's freezing that ice around. It can freeze up to the throttle plate here and basically choke your engine. So this is why they have back here carburetor heat. So what can happen when you have icing in your, or carburetor icing, is you'll notice that your RPM starts to drop without you changing the throttle. So that's an indication of carburetor icing. How you would fix it, if you see that, is by adding carb heat. And it takes ambient heat from the exhaust. I think there's also a picture. Yes, it takes ambient heat from the exhaust, and instead of sending out that through the muffler, it actually redirects some of that hot air to be controlled by also another little knob in the cockpit for carburetor heat. So you can start moving that hot air into the carburetor and heating up to melt that ice, which obviously, if we start melting the ice in the carburetor, what's going to happen? There's going to be water in the carburetor. And we want fuel and air in the carburetor. We don't want water. So what's going to happen when we get to talk about it? Yeah, it's basically going to decrease as soon as you put in carb heat, which you won't here, but say you go fly other things. As soon as you put in carb heat to melt that ice, you're expecting for your engine performance to decrease immediately because that ice is melting, and now you're running water through your system instead of fuel and air for a while. But then once it's melted and that water moves through, it's not catastrophic. Basically, water's not going to kill your engine. You'll still have an engine. It'll just be decreased performance. So with something like that, you will be able to head to your nearest airport and land until you can get that clear in your carburetor. It's not like but if you choke it without choking by, if you let that ice accumulate and it chokes your engine to the point of it can't get any fuel and air inside your combustion chambers, then you're out of an engine. And then there's not really any time for that carb heat to work to start melting. So that's why they say as RPMs drop, without changing the throttle, that's when you need to add carb heat so you don't get into the situation where you lose your engine completely. Yes.
So after the carburetor in the engine, is there another filter for that specific reason?
For like water, like a
Yeah,
water
Do
filter.
you guys have like a
Um,
route to where the mixture actually gets to the end? Is there a filter before that happens, or is it straight in it?
Ling doesn't have it, so I don't know specifically. I would think the way that they teach all in King School too, the way that they teach it just assumes that the air or the water would just run through
Yeah, get about.
and get evaporated. So I don't think they have any type of filter. I think it's
Do you guys have
just
one carburetor or more than one?
okay. So we're gonna get to that. It's gonna, I think the ULS is gonna get to this, or it's gonna preview the ULS carburetor on here. So I think this is the next few slides when we get there. I think, yeah, fuel injection system, cool little picture or moving picture here. So I think we've already covered this. The air intake for the fuel is similar to the carb, so you're bringing in it depends on whether it's combined before or after. If it's injected directly into the cylinders or just ahead of the intake valve. Like I said in the sling, it's mixed just ahead of the intake valve and then pushed into the intake valve, which is then pulled into the pistons. Fuel injection system. Okay, so major jump in engine efficiency, the injectors are controlled by the ECU. Do we know what ECU stands for? Yes. Engine control unit, yeah. So this is gonna be important in sling systems tomorrow. The ECU is in the slings, the brain of the engine. It's deciding, it controls the fuel pumps, the fuel injectors, and the spark plugs, and it's constantly working through sensors to determine how much it needs and what's firing based on the altitude, based on the current outside air temperature, all the sensors. So the computer, which is the ECU, the engine control unit, is deciding all of this and releases an exact amount of fuel based on the conditions that it determines. So like it says, it limits the waste of fuel. It's very precise. A lot of the times with carbureted engines, if it's pilot controlled, there's always going to be errors, right? So very, very, very efficient. Each cylinder has 2 fuel injectors. We already talked about that. Makes a hot engine start harder. We're gonna get into vapor lock either tomorrow or a little bit later because we have to worry about that in the summer. But it's basically when the fuel lines get so hot that it evaporates the fuel inside the lines. Evaporated fuel does not work in an engine. It can't do anything with evaporated fuel, so you lose your engine. There's been a couple instances with slings where they have had a loss of engine because of vapor lock. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's the idea of vapor lock is vaporized fuel inside your fuel lines because the lines are so hot. And relies on aircraft computers. That's pretty much talked about. Normal ignition system provides a spark that ignites the fuel. I think you understand that. We have magnetos and spark plugs, and then they have leads and ignition switch. So what's important to know about the magnetos is they're self-contained sources of electrical energy. So even if you were to lose electrical power, the engine will still run because these are self-contained sources of electrical energy. This is different from the sling, where if we lose electrical power, we are losing our engine. So we'll get to that tomorrow, but these are self-contained using magnets is how they produce electrical energy. And each of these magnetos, the left and the right, you can see these lines all lead to, each magneto has one spark plug in each cylinder. So if one magneto were to fail, the other magneto has control of all and is able to send electrical energy to all of the cylinders. Does that make sense? So redundancy again, if you lose a magneto, the other one is still able to send power, not enough power to create, high enough performance. So again, this would be a situation where you had just enough power to go land the plane, in like a pre-emergency type situation, but it has enough power to keep the engine running. So wow, that's a lot of words. Okay. I think this is what I was talking about. Magneto uses a magnet to create electrical energy. I think we got this. The magneto is creating electrical energy with high voltage to jump a spark plug. So spark plug has like two little, does anyone know cars? What's the two parts of the spark plug called? Where it like jumps across?
It's a great question.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, I don't know.
obviously you don't need to know to fly a plane, so just know that there's a gap that the spark jumps across the spark plug in each cylinder, and the magneto is what's sending that high voltage to be able to spark the spark plug, to ignite the spark plug. Begins to fire, continues to operate. It's a lot of words. Yeah, if one magneto fails, the other is unaffected, continues to operate normally, but decrease in power is expected because now it's only running on one. And redundancy is a lot, but two, it just keeps an even burn and smooth power when you have two. So like when you have two spark plugs firing at the same time, for all of these, it's just an even burn, providing smooth power is what you're getting from two, and you're also getting redundancy. So ULS, yeah, the POH, they just updated the POH, so I'd be curious to see if it still says that we have magnetos, but we don't. They're magneto-like. They work kind of the same like magnetos, but they're called CDI boxes, capacitor discharge ignition boxes. It's like a substitute magneto system. It does the same thing, both two boxes control 4 spark plugs each and 2 spark plugs per cylinder, same way. It's utilized to save space. So tomorrow, when we get into the sling systems, we will talk a little bit more about the CDI boxes and how they're used, but just important to know, we have CDIs, technically not magnetos. They work the same way, where they mechanically time the firing of the spark plugs, but just important to know. And I think that's it. That's what they look like. CDIs. Capacitor discharge ignitions. Fuel injected have ignition coils rather than CDIs. So what it's doing the same thing as magnetos or CDIs. It's providing that high voltage, or it's converting low voltage to high voltage. It's providing that power to spark the spark plug. It provides, and ignition coil provides a spark. And the ECU again controls the ignition coils, the spark plugs, and the fuel pumps. We'll go over this tomorrow as well, but it's controlling that in the ECU, the engine control unit. So there's only 4 ignition coils because they each house 2 spark plugs. Like I said, it's a high voltage, creating power that ignites the spark plug. More resistant to wear and tear. 3 minutes, okay. Octane ratings and fuel types. Whitley, what type of fuel do we use in the sling?
Gas.
We use 100 low lead. This is blue right here, avgas, and we mix in some 91 MOGAS. That's That's automotive fuel. The trucks literally go to Costco, you'll see them there and fill up 91, and then they mix that in with 100 low lead. Tomorrow, we might get a little bit of why. This also, I don't have enough time to talk about this, but they are transitioning the type of fuel that we're using to 94 unleaded, just like a magenta color, which will be very, very different than what we're seeing right now, because right now it's very clear and like a tiny bit of blue, but not really. But it's important to know the octane ratings because it's the octane rating is its ability to withstand compression until it ignites. So the higher the grade, the more pressure it can withstand without detonating. So the idea is that if you're in a situation where you can't get the fuel that you usually use for your plane, that you always want to go higher in octane ratings than lower, because higher means it can withstand more pressure, and then your engine will not, we'll talk about probably tomorrow because the class fell down, but we'll talk about detonation and pre-ignition. But those are issues with if you choose too low of an octane rating, it will be compressed and combust too early. So yeah, this is it for today. I try to run through all of them. I feel like, yeah, all we have is detonation and ignition to begin tomorrow, which is pretty good. But be ready for sling system tomorrow. It's gonna be a long one. You're gonna get really tired of my voice, so at least you had a break today. And I'll see you all tomorrow. Welcome.